know about you guys, but Thanksgiving was very interesting. We talked about a lot of crazy things. GLP-1, sexy time, why people aren't married, bowel movements, but nobody talked about money. I don't know if I'm alone in this, but it's one of the last taboos we have in society. And we're here to open up this conversation. So first, why, Davida, do we not talk about money? As openly, when we go out with our girlfriends, we will literally talk about everything. Fertility, mental health, politics, all the things that used to be taboo, but not money.
Because we're not educated on money, and we should be, right? I think I was looking at something earlier that said it wasn't until 1974, right, when women could have their own credit cards and own bank accounts. So I don't know how old a lot of you are, but 1974 wasn't that damn long ago.
Yesterday.
So we weren't educated. So I think that's part of the problem. Education is why it doesn't come up as much, and it should.
And we don't learn this stuff in school. And Taylor, you've built an amazing platform in helping educate young people about money, but it's all generations.
I think it's definitely all generations, but we had a little round table in the back room where my generation, we learned to talk in therapy. And I think we're now transcending these barriers of not talking about money and having open conversations around the table with, hey, you guys want to go out to eat today? Oh, yeah, I can. Well, where do you want to go? We can go to a fast stakeout, or we can go wine and dine.
I want to go wine and dine.
I like a wine and dine, too.
And Kristina, you help couples decouple. So you're talking about finances within couples, which is one of the leading causes of divorce. Why do you think couples don't talk about money? And why is it such a shock when there's this conscious decoupling?
Well, I think that marriages or couples, I think the idea of financial intimacy is super scary. And while, yes, I do decouple people, I also very much believe in marriages. I very much believe in the partnership. But I think, just as much as we need sexual intimacy and emotional intimacy, we need that financial intimacy. We need to feel connected in all of those ways to really feel like you're truly partners with somebody.
Agreed. I've always found Ben Franklin sexy as hell.
The sexiest. And there is financial infidelity, too, just like any sort of infidelity where you're not sharing something.
So that's actually a big thing in California, that one of the grounds for domestic violence is financial coercive control, where when you have one spouse who controls the finances and intimidates and makes people feel like they don't have a free will over their financial circumstances. Right. It's a really big thing in California right now.
It's a big thing anywhere, but it's always a bigger thing in California. And Rachel, you talk to couples as they're growing their net worth too, and you say sometimes women don't even want to be part of the numbers and the conversation about where your money is. Why do you think that is?
I think that women are delegating where they can because we're juggling so much. We have careers, we have children, we're running households. So something that we can take a step back from and delegate to our partner, we often do. But what we always advocate for is hopefully we're creating an environment where it's a little more interesting, it's a little more approachable, and it's not something that you create an environment where you can't ask questions. So our job is to empower women, to educate them, to get them to open the account statements, to walk them through it, make sure they understand it, and to help them to be a part of the financial plan. So they may not be as interested in some topics, but I think everybody cares about where we want to be, what our goals are, that we want to buy that house or whatever, take care of our children, wealth transfer, gifts. So figuring out where we can actually engage women.
I think the big issue with that is the jargon. There's so much freaking jargon in finance. And if anybody has a jargony thing that they're confused about, please don't be shy. We're in a safe space. Just throw it out. But I love this panel because it's really a progression of your financial life. Taylor is helping Gen Z get it together and get it all. Davida is helping you with your payroll as you start making more money. Kristina's helping you potentially get a prenup. Rachel's... which we all should have. And Rachel's helping you manage your money, and then maybe you go back to Kristina for the divorce.
But in the center, right? Connect everybody.
We all have jargon in all these areas of finance. I'm going to start with you, Davida, because there's so much jargon even on your payroll. Who looks at your payroll statement, by the way?
Raise your hand, please.
I love it.
Okay, it's not enough though, right? So I love that people are raising their hand, and I ask that you ask that question because we started about education. In order to know what to do with your money, you need to look at your money and where it's coming from and whether it's accurate.
But like, what does all that stuff on the payroll statement mean?
Oh, like FICA and all of that? No, it
can you
means
decode it?
So the taxes and the deductions are what you really need to know about. And unfortunately, some of the jargon is based on acronyms, based on the system that's built. But everybody knows what FICA is, right? And it's the Social Security and Medicare portion that's on your check that my children go, who is FICA and why am I paying them? That one is my favorite one because state and federal kind of stick out at you. But when you look at your paycheck, FICA is the one that just goes, what the hell is that? So I like to explain to people what that part of it is. What else? There's tons of them. I can't even think of more of the jargon. You mentioned something earlier in finance that we say, and people are like, what, dividends? What the hell is a dividend?
I think it just I want to reel it back for as far as the young adults go. And I grew up with the saying, Taylor, money doesn't grow on trees. And I'm like, Mom, I think they do, actually. Let me tell you how. So we have our seed of budgeting, we think about it, and it's an abundance mindset. We have our roots growing in as our savings accounts and an emergency fund so that when a storm comes by, guess what? Those roots are grounded. We have our primary source of income as the trunk, and the bigger that gets, the bigger the trunk is gonna be. We have these branches that aren't necessarily the strongest, like the trunk, but they can make you money and they can make that cash flow and make these leaves. What is that? That could be turning your side hustle into a lot more income. That could be real estate investments. That could be investing in the stock market. What about the bark? Okay, that's your insurance. That protects the trees from things coming in. So there's so many ways that you can create fun, cool analogies, but I think that's one that people just get it, right? It's like, yes, Mom, money grows on trees now, thank you.
Or money grows where you invest. Right. And I think that's a bigger conversation. I have an 11-month-old, and I think a lot about how we were taught to talk about money growing up. Like, we can't buy that, we can't afford that. And that sticks with us. I mean, the trauma of that and financial trauma is a whole other panel discussion. But I think that has seeped into our subconscious for how we deal with money as adults. One of my favorite is EBITDA. We have an EBITDA sweatshirt, by the way, which just means profits. And like, if you didn't know what it was, it sounds kind of like an STD.
Totally.
You know, it's a whole other language. But the point is, if you don't speak Japanese and you went to Japan, you would be really confused. If you didn't speak the language of money and you went to Wall Street, you would be really confused until you can talk about this in a way that everybody understands minus the jargon.
Right. I think sometimes I even see situations where people intentionally talk with jargon, especially with finance. And I don't mean to gender stereotype, but sometimes it's men that use those big words that kind of intimidate you. And I think that as we should just ask the question. So first off, I mean, thankfully we have these great content creators that you can actually watch and educate yourself. And then we have people like us that you can actually just call and ask questions to. And don't be afraid to ask questions and when they answer them, if that answer does not make sense, ask them to tell you in a different way.
I mean, I can just add, a lot of my clients, when they've going through the divorce process, they really gain a tremendous amount of financial knowledge, and they become really confident in themselves, and they feel empowered, and they work very closely with people like Rachel, who they work on a budget, and they work on what the income is, and they're gonna figure out what the difference between an alternative investment is versus fixed income. And I think they become very comfortable asking these questions and talking to people like you to feel much more confidence in that world and understand the jargon words.
It's brilliant to not wait. So I love that you brought that up because we talked about it in the back, to not wait until you're in a position where you have to learn it in a crash course because you're going through a divorce and you want to figure it out. So personal story, I went through a divorce 5 years ago. Shout out to my ex-husband for not being a jerk. But it was really a crash course for both of us in our finances and what we had to go through. I'm actually lucky that I chose to do payroll for a living 30 years ago and understand the impact to me. So I was more educated than he was, frankly. And I find that many women are starting to take control of that conversation. So when it was time for us to have the divorce, I had a different contribution. I threw in my own damn jargon.
Wait, it's never too early to learn about finances, and it's also never too late. I think that's important. So, I mean, in that situation, it's when you wait until you need to learn during a period that's emotional, that's tough. I mean, 8 out of 10 women end up alone at some point, either through getting divorced or women outlive men. So it's like, this is the time, if we haven't already done it, to start to take control and start to just educate and empower ourselves.
I think the 3 big excuses that I hear a lot is that I'm too old to start, I don't have enough money to start, and I'm not a numbers girl. Let me just tell you, you're never as young as you are today, and today is as good a day as any to get started. I started as a poetry major, so I could do it, anybody could do it. And you don't need a lot of money to start. You need the most time possible. There's a saying in Wall Street, time in the market beats timing the market. So now that we've helped discuss and not close the wage gap, but we're closing it, I think the wealth gap is what we need to talk about more. So now that we're starting to make money, where should we put it?
I mean, I think you have to just start investing, to your point. I think people get caught up and they look at the market, they say it's high, they say they're waiting for the right time, interest rates, what's happening with that. There's always a lot of noise. And I think if you are earning money, to your point, you have the power of compounding. The longer that you have that money in the market, the more important it is. You're never gonna time the market, you're never gonna take the money out at the right time and then put it back in. And the people who try to do that are in their own way. So there's a lot of behavioral finances, which is why people, hire professionals to help guide them through those times.
I mean, not having this conversation is what I wish I could go back and tell my former self to definitely have. Taylor, I wish I could go back and be 25 and put money in the market, but to your point, I think people use jargon to keep others out of the conversation. And compounding, I was introduced to, perhaps like many of us were, with the debt. So I was in a boatload of credit card debt, and I saw that this crazy force of compound interest was working against me. And then I had a eureka moment, as you did, where I was like, damn, this same force can work in my favor.
Yeah, so I learned when I was in my teens that the most expensive sentence in personal finance is, I'll wait. And it goes into this conversation about compound interest. There's a reason why Albert Einstein says compound interest is the 8th wonder of the world. I just mentioned this on the news some weeks ago. If you had just invested in 2020, by 2025, your money would have doubled. When I tell people that, they're like, oh my goodness. And when I tell also younger people, if you don't start investing at 25 and you wait until you're 35, you're going to have to put in double the effort to get to what a 25-year-old would have to contribute to versus if you're 35 and you just wait.
I think I want to also just talk about investing anyway, because I think before we even talk about money, women understand what it means to invest. Our time, our patience, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we know the benefit of that, of being able to invest. So start there, right? If someone says invest to you, then you should be listening anyway, because we know the benefits of investing. But some of the trouble that you have is that people, one, don't know where their money is coming from, or don't earn enough to feel like they can invest. So it's always interesting to determine that, wait, we should be taking the time to invest in that. Just like we take time to invest in self-care, take some of that money and put it to the side to invest it in self-care.
Oh yeah, or your time. When people's like, I don't have time to look into investing or watch the stock market. You don't. You have to set it and forget it. But how much time did you spend researching those boots that you just bought, or like the vacation? If you could just take a fraction of that time and invest in yourself, listen to a podcast, read a book. I mean, it is your money. There's nothing more important than understanding where that is. And part of the Einstein quote is, those who don't use it will pay compound interest. And so how do we get women, all of us, on the other side of that equation as early as possible?
Well, I can add here, I think it's really important for them to become feeling educated. I think it's really important for them to feel like it's, making your partnership stronger. I mean, I have so many people who come to me and they're like, I don't know where we have our money. I don't know what our budget is. I don't know how much income we have. And they kind of lose their identity because they don't have that really important sense of knowledge on that stuff. So the more we can educate, like, even the younger communities to have those difficult talks. I mean, it's not easy to talk about money with your partner. It's scary. I mean, I know people in my own friend group who've had trouble talking to their spouses about money, and it's very uncomfortable. But the earlier that we have those conversations, and the more we have our financial advisors talking to both spouses, and the more we talk about it, I really think it's so worthwhile. It's so important to not lose your identity in that regard.
I totally agree. And there's this conversation about looking into your bank account and saying, what is my net worth? And maybe even looking into yourself and saying, is that number correlated to my worth? And I want to say that the money in your bank account is not what financial confidence is, right? Financial confidence is knowing that you have options, knowing your identity, because money at the end of the day is a mirror. It's a reflection of who you already are. And if you have more resources to go and utilize, more of you will just come out through money. And so I think it's a really interesting conversation.
I think that a lot of times we feel that if we ignore our finances, that will end up being better, but I actually think if you address them and confront them, it can be so empowering. Like, think about in your life. I mean, we don't want to admit this, but so many decisions we make have to do with money and finances. And knowing and understanding can be so empowering, because now we can change jobs or start a business or leave a partner that doesn't make sense to be with, because we have an understanding, because we're in control of our finances.
And not for nothing, don't be afraid to connect that money to your value and the human capital that you're contributing, right? I do payroll for a living because it's about people and not numbers, and I had to say that for you. I say that because if it's not about the numbers, then you're thinking about how it impacts me as an individual and as a human, I'm putting more into it. So as women, think about money as am I getting value? When I get that new job, am I getting value for what I'm putting into it? And if I am, what am I going to do with that? And it makes a difference.
But it gives you that freedom to leave an abusive relationship, to leave a toxic job. And it is a reflection of who you are. And actually, no money in my bank account will ever make me feel safe. I lost my home in the LA fires earlier this year. And I can tell you that if I could go back before my house burned down, I would have bought more stocks than stuff. And nothing will make you feel safe. It's not the house, it's not the bank account, it's much, much deeper than that. And I think we all have to come to terms with where our financial trauma is, because we all have one. I bailed my mother out of jail using cash under the sink behind the maxi pad. So mine is very, very real and deep. But we all have financial trauma if we grew up through the dot-com bubble or the housing crash or COVID. I mean, we all have seen, I saw my house foreclosed on when I was a kid, and so that determines how we look at money. How have you come to terms with your own money story and trying to take control of that, regardless of how you were taught or regardless of what you saw growing up?
Oh, I'd love to answer that question because I'm a little girl from Brooklyn. And I say that because Brooklyn and New York being so nostalgic for me, it was a time in the 70s and 80s where it was probably as desolate as it can get, right? So you're surrounded by poor, but you don't know how poor you are, right? And I remember that, and I remember that being a happier time for me, but people didn't have money. So I couldn't figure out why I loved money so much when the people I was around didn't have a lot of it when I was growing up. What I saw was the power it gave. people to motivate, to move, to change their environment. The importance of money to the upward growth of people around me is what I paid attention to. So it wasn't that I was okay that it wasn't there. I knew that money is what I needed to not be there. And I think that's the biggest lesson I learned is like, oh yeah, I don't want to be here, so I'm gonna make some money.
So you saw what you don't want to do.
That's right.
So because I want to make my marriage very strong, I will literally sit down with my husband and teach him how to read a tax return.
Sexy.
Very sexy. That's the sexual connection, right? And so it is very important, like, that we don't just say, oh, Chris is going to handle this, or my husband's going to handle this. Like, we talk about it, we explain, we understand. And I think that's very important.
Well, it's so...
I don't know if everybody wants to be sexy like that, but...
you know how to have a good time.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think I've seen this so often that women will finally get their financial life in order or have the interest when their husband dies or they get divorced. And it's very much like a diagnosis. It's really hard to be proactive versus reactive. So it's like eat healthy after, God forbid, you get a cancer diagnosis, but harder to do before.
I mean, one of the things I want to tell everybody is, and again, I can only really talk about California, but in California, a spouse is not required to leave any of their assets to their other spouse upon death. New York has different rules, but in California, you don't have to leave any of what I own to my spouse upon death. So I'm a big believer, like, go to the estate planner together, talk it through, understand what exists. It's very empowering because when people come to me like, I don't know what our estate plan says. I don't know what he's done for me or not done for me. It's incredibly scary. So have those hard conversations and do that so at least there's transparency and accountability in that regard.
How do you be proactive?
You show up. Mm-hmm. You join the conversations. You attend a meeting. If you have a financial advisor, sit in, join a call, ask questions. I think you open up your statements, you look at your paycheck, you just start. I think that's always the hardest thing. It's the same thing, we're talking about dieting a lot, like just starting to go on a good regimen. You don't want to bite off more than you can chew at once, but baby steps go a long way.
What you consume is who you become. And that starts for me and my generation on social media. So if you're not following educational accounts, such as maybe Nicole's or myself's little plug-in, you will have brain rot, so they say. So I think it really starts with where are you going ahead? And, like you said, are you having conversations with your friends at the dinner table? Are you watching conversations online? Are you going deep into the Reddit forums, right? Like, these are areas in which we can all do a better job if we really want to educate ourselves, because at the end of the day, knowledge is power, but it's only power when it's applied.
And if you want to have those conversations, I think sometimes you have to go first.
That's right.
So if we're at dinner with the girlfriends and we're talking about a whole lot of very, very personal things, and I'll say, hey, what are you making? Or like, what is your significant other investing in, or something like that? And all of a sudden it's crickets. And I'm like, wait a minute, you just told me about your landing strip or whatever. Like, what do you mean this is crickets? Is this a joke? And so I think starting that conversation is really important if you want to have that. But it's tricky. So how do you do it in a different
what's so interesting
situation?
too is that I think it's a tricky situation generationally, right? And I love that we have so many generations represented at this conference. It gives me so much joy that we can share across. I mean, a lot of lessons learned is what I explained. Like, if you don't know what you don't know, share the lessons learned and why you don't want to be there, and you'd be surprised who's willing to jump in and have a conversation. You mentioned estate planning, and I thought that was so important, that there's a ton of people who don't even realize the need for it. Like, why? What do I need that for? I'm not gonna die. I'm not gonna do that, or whatever. And I appreciate there's a lot of people who believe they'll live forever, but you're not. So let's make sure we're
They're scared to
doing
have
that.
the conversation because they don't know what their spouse is gonna say in that regard. right?
That's right. That's right. And it's really interesting to see how, and not necessarily men, because, you have marriages that are same-sex marriages as well. Someone in the marriage has the upper hand around the finances. Someone usually does. And I actually don't think that's necessarily necessary, unless my ex-husband and spent money he shouldn't spend. But he should still know, right? You should still communicate about it. But someone should decide that someone's the stronger, and let it be a discussion, not just decide that it's the man who's going to do it, right?
I mean, it was you in your relationship.
It was me.
You bought him a house.
I did buy him a house, Lord.
Shout out to him.
Oh, I got sidetracked with the buying the house. I'm visualizing this like.
It was easier, trust me. Trust me.
When we're thinking about estate planning, right? It's important. Like, what do we need to know about? Let's just do brass tacks here. Like, what do we need to know about getting a trust? Do we need to do like power of attorney, TODs on accounts? Tell us everything.
I think that finances. This is the reality. It's very personal, and like what is my priority may not be Kristina's, and even my husband and my husband's also in finance. Like, we may both have different opinions. So like, your voice needs to be heard and your goals need to be met, and you need to protect yourself. And by the way, this idea of not asking, which I get, it's intimidating, you're entitled to know. It's your finances, there's marital assets. So you're okay asking the questions, and I think that asking them in good times is probably better than waiting until things aren't good.
Yeah, and it's never too late, it's never too early. Taylor, how do you open up that conversation? And for some of us, for our kids in the room.
So when it comes to my generation, we've experienced social media profiles being anonymous. And so we have an optionality of, do we want to showcase who we really are? Or this online version of us of who we really are, right? There's an in-person and there's a virtual. And so it really depends on the person. As you said, personal finance is very much personal. And if the conversation becomes a lot more comfortable, if you want to express yourself through an anonymous online profile, to go ahead and ask some of these questions that might be very dire, extremely important and timely to you, go for it. Don't let the pressure of now stop you from asking these very important questions, especially if you don't want to ask them, like you said, at the dinner table. But I recommend if you do start and it's your first time, we could do the wine and dine.
Wine always helps the conversations, I think. But it's totally true. If you say you want to learn about finances, but if you're following a bunch of reality, which, by the way, you can do both, then do you really want to learn about it? Are you surrounding yourself with this type of content? Are you seeking out friends that will have these conversations? Because we all will.
Yeah, and I do believe we need to seek out those conversations. I mean, the landing strip thing had me tripping, because I don't think I've ever talked about that at dinner, Nicole. but it does take someone to actually start the conversation. So just not being afraid. And if it's a safe space to talk about that, then it's a safe space to talk about finances. And we have to just kind of encourage each other more in that regard. And I appreciate the anonymous thing, but something about that human touch that, I love the social media thing, but that's a generational thing. I want to sit next to someone and say, girl, how'd you handle that? Yeah. Right? And it's okay for us to have those conversations. Like, I just met these women, we talked about my divorce, right? But you want to share that so someone else doesn't go through it themselves, right? And we do it on everything else, right?
People make mistakes too, that like if you just open up to your friends or people that maybe have experience, you won't make those same mistakes.
Well, I wanted to bring that up too. Like, what are some of the mistakes we've all made that you wish the audience wouldn't? How can they learn from you?
Well, I just want to add to one thing. So marriage is just like a business, right? Think about it this way. You and I wouldn't go into business together without the understanding, like, what are you going to bring to the business and what am I going to bring to the business, right? Mm-hmm. We would understand our respective roles. Marriage or partnerships is the exact same thing. We need to understand what we're each going to bring to the union and what we're each going to do for each other. And you are very right. We have absolutely the right to understand and know and see even if something's in someone's separate property or, you know, individual name, we have the right to see and understand it.
And by the way, everybody has a prenup and everybody has an estate plan, whether they do it or not. It's the state.
Exactly.
The state decides.
That's exactly right.
So decide if you want to decide or you want to have California decide.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest mistakes that I made was my way of thinking. I grew up in a small family business where it was very much hustle culture, industrial laundromat, where time equals money, and the hours that you put in is going to be the money that you get out. I very much learned very quickly early on that a janitor can put in as much time as somebody working at Google, and yet their compensation is going to be very much different. And yet the janitor who might invest their money over time might make more millions than the lifestyle inflation that the employee at Google had, right? And so for me, it was this conversation of, how do I make my money make money? How do I become the CEO and make my best employee my money? And for me, that ended up being through my investments.
And pay yourself first, which we talked about before.
Yeah, I mean, we work so hard for our money. I think it should return the favor. And we've been lied to that we just need to make more money and so we'll get ahead. It is not what you make, but what you keep that matters the most. And talk about lifestyle creep. I'm sure you've seen people get raises upon raises, but their net worth potentially is going down and down because the nice to haves become the need to haves. The private school, you know.
Oh, we brought this up earlier, especially in entertainment and the amount of money people make. And you can go from not making any money to all of a sudden being a multimillionaire and not having any education on what to do with that money. And it's a scary, scary place to be. I think it's super important for us to explain to people what you do with that money. I mean, the first thing you want to do, you know, from the hood is go buy a car and a chain, as I wear this beautiful necklace. But not mine. But know the difference between appreciation and depreciation. We're talking about jargon again. Are you going to really go out there and buy a car, or are you going to buy something different, right? Like, I've made some bad decisions on purchases. I'm not going to do that again, right? And it's the ones that don't grow in value, the ones that are not an investment, that I wouldn't do again. Actually, I'm lying. I still do it, but not as much. And it goes back to what we talked about.
Consciously.
I do it consciously now because I like pretty things. But to your stuff comment, right? There's a balance, and you have to have a balance of both. I don't say go without, because that's silly.
No, it's silly. There's a, you know, sort of famous financial example of if you bought Apple stock instead of every iPhone that came out, you'd have more than $2 million now. And so it's unrealistic to not have an iPhone. Obviously, there is a balance, but more stocks and stuff. I don't think anybody in the history of the world has ever said, I'm so glad I didn't invest earlier.
You know what, when it comes to women, and I think you guys can speak to it better, is that we never know what to invest in. We say, well, I don't know what to invest in. And what I always, for me, I look at things that I use. So I love that you brought that up. Like, you're going to buy iPhone or you're going to buy Apple stock, right? So what you're doing on a day-to-day basis teaches you about the stock market. Find out about what you're wearing, what you're doing, and look up who that company is and decide. You might be really surprised that you can get shares for a small amount. I've done that.
Or ask your kids what they're buying, because like,
true.
The parent company of Labubu has gone way up this year. Just saying. What would you suggest if somebody is just starting to invest or just starting to think about investing? They're like, okay, I'm inspired by this discussion. It's never too late. It's never too early. Let's do it now. How would you get started?
So, see, I come from this school of thought where everything is very personal. That's why, so for me, I would want to understand like how much risk tolerance they have. And the reason I say that is because, yes, I think if you have a long-term perspective, we know that you're going to do the best if you're in a diversified stock portfolio over time. But if you're going to panic if the market goes down and sell, then you're going to get in a lot of trouble. So I think that understanding our psychology and our ability to stomach risk really will dictate the type of portfolio that we should put together. But yes, like over time, if you have a long-term perspective, having a diversified stock portfolio is going to outperform.
Or everybody says low-cost S&P 500 index funds. Can you decode what that means if somebody doesn't know? Like, first, get a brokerage. It's not a bank, right? Second, go into potentially index funds. So what's an index fund?
What's an index fund? It's a basket of stocks that represents an index. So it's going to be buying positions in the companies that the index represents. So the S&P 500, you're going to be having ownership in all the different stocks that are represented in the S&P 500. So it's a good way to have a diversified portfolio instead of picking one company, which if you pick one company you're passionate about, maybe that does really well, or maybe it doesn't. The whole thing is you don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Like eggs, the supermarket analogy that you used earlier was absolutely brilliant because what you said, yes. How many people just went completely blank? I know a lot of them did, but when you actually are bringing it into real world environment and connect the dots, it's brilliant. So what was your analogy?
And
I'm sorry.
really quick, yeah. Stock market, I think of it like the grocery store where there's different aisles and different sectors. You have, the vegetable aisle, which might be a technology sector, and we can go on and on and on. But the moral of the story is that there's different brands within each of these sectors. You can go and pick these different companies that are available within those sectors. We all know that if we're going to eat ice cream, our doctor is going to get very upset with us if that's what we're eating all of the time. So in order for us to have a healthy, balanced diet, we equate that to having a healthy, diversified portfolio, going in and picking out fruits and vegetables and different types of protein and all of that stuff. So that's the little analogy. That's the stock market grocery store.
Yeah, it's the best.
Delicious.
We love that because it breaks it down into ways that we all understand it. But I also think having a plan is super important. You have to keep a good discipline, just like going to the gym. You don't go to the gym one time and have a six-pack. In fact, I go often and I still don't. But I think that having that approach where you're going to put away a certain amount of your paycheck and you're going to have it in a disciplined plan. And if the market goes down, see that as an opportunity. It's like going to a store and seeing an amazing sale. You want to buy more, not panic and say, oh, whoa, I'm out. I'm not investing in it. It didn't go up like Nicole said.
Yeah, it's the cost of growing your wealth. We don't get upset if we went into Chanel and things were 30% off, right? We would be stoked.
Does that happen in Chanel?
I don't think so. But high quality investments become on sale when the market goes down. But it's the opposite of what we want to do instinctively. We know, okay, the panel said buy low, sell high. But in our hearts, when it's down, we want to, sell, and we want to buy when it's euphoria. And so I think trying to do the opposite gets tricky because you're like, oh my God, that's my hard-earned money. And a lot of people in this room are from Hollywood, so they probably have a wealth manager, I don't know, or a business manager. How would you guys recommend knowing enough about your own finances if somebody else is managing it too?
But that's the most important point. So I don't buy into the idea of you should do that because I said so, or my clients do that, or just listen to me. No. It's great to have a team, and it's so important to build the right people around you, have checks and balances, but be a part of those decisions. Ask questions, educate yourself so that you can sit in the room and dictate that or challenge.
And no one's going to care as much about your money as you are, period, the end. I don't care who it is.
I think there's something to be said going about the grocery store analogy really quick. And at the end of the day, somebody's got to eat. You are going to go to the grocery store and you're going to pick out your food, right? Or somebody's got to eat, meaning inflation's going to eat it, something else is going to eat it, the interest on the credit card debt is going to eat it. And so who do you want to eat? Do you want to be self-plenished or that other thing?
We want to eat. Girls got to eat.
Let's eat.
I think we're all hungry, and I hope we're all hungry for more knowledge. Now we can continue this conversation forever. I know these ladies are going to stick around, so if anybody else has more questions and wants to continue the conversation, we would be stoked to do that. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.